Combining the Form Wizard and Layout View are easy ways to get started creating your own database's forms. But the real power and flexibility lies in utilizing the full design environment for creating forms from scratch. Once you understand what's going on under the hood, creating your own forms that meet your exact specifications and needs will become second nature. Let's start by creating a Rolodex-style employee directory for Kinetico. First, I always like to review the information that's stored in the underlying table. Let's double-click on the Employees table here. Now each record in this table represents a single employee. I have information like their first name, their last name, or what department they work in. If I scroll over here to the right, we have an attachment field that includes a headshot or a photograph of each employee. I want to create a form that presents this information in a more visually appealing way. Now I've already created a form here called Employee Directory Complete. If we open that up, we can see the type of form that we're going to be aiming for in this chapter. I can see all the information about my employees here, including their headshot. And as we scroll through the records, we can see all the different employees that are in that table. Let's go ahead and close this down, and we'll start building our own from scratch. We'll start by going up to the Create tab here, and in the Forms group here, I'm going to choose Form Design. That'll open up a new form in Design View. Now when it loads up, we have a blank form here with this dot and grid pattern in the background. This is a snapping grid that'll help us align all of our different elements. These edges down here represent the borders of our form. I can click on the edge here and drag it up to make it a little bit smaller so it all fits on the screen. Now the first thing we want to do is connect our form to a data source. I can do that by going up to the Design tab and choosing Add Existing Fields here. This will give me a listing of all the tables in my database. And if I expand my Employees table here, it'll show me all the fields within that table. Let's go ahead and find the first field and click and drag it into this detail section in my form. When we do that, we actually get two elements. This one over here on the left is a label. It currently says first, which is the name of the field from the data table. This one over here on the right also says first, but it's a text box. This is where the data is going to appear when we view our form. If we switch our form into Form View by clicking on the button over here in the top left, we can see that change. The one on the left still says first, which is the label. The one on the right now says Zachary, which is the first name of our first employee. If we cycle through the different records here, we can see that information changes. Let's go back up into Design View. I'll click on the downward pointing arrow here and choose Design View. When we select these elements, we get control handles around the edges. These will allow us to resize. So for instance, if I drag on the one on the top middle, I can make it taller. Or if I click this one over here, I can make it wider. The same thing applies over here to the label. If I click on it, I get the control handles, and I can drag it around to resize. The control handle in the upper left-hand corner will help us move these items around. If I click here, you'll notice that my cursor changes, and I can reposition this element wherever I'd like. Now if I click anywhere else where there's not a control handle around the orange box here, I get the same moving icon, but when I click and drag, you notice that both elements move together. So if I click here and drag it down, they both move down together. If I want to move them independently, I need to remember to use the handle in the upper left-hand corner. Let's go ahead and drag this over here and put it on top of the text box. Now there's also some keyboard shortcuts that we can use. If I use the arrow keys on my keyboard, we can nudge elements around on the screen. If I hold the Shift key down while I'm using the arrow keys, we can resize elements. For instance, if I press Shift right, we can make things wider. Shift left will make them narrower. Shift up will make them shorter, and Shift down will make them taller. We can go ahead and select multiple items by holding down the Shift key and clicking with the mouse. Now that both of these are selected, I can hold Shift and press up to make them both shorter. Then I'll let go of Shift, and I'll use the up arrow key to move it up. So that's how we can resize and reposition elements on our form. Let's go ahead and add the rest of our fields from the field list over here on the right onto our form over here. I'll go ahead and take Employee ID and click and drag it over here. Instead of clicking and dragging, I can also double click. So for instance, I'll just double click on last name, and that automatically gets added to my form over here. Let's go ahead and add building, department, status, hire date. I'm going to skip the information about benefits and salaries. We'll go ahead and double click on photo to add that as well. At any point in the design process, we can switch into Form View to see how it's going to look with data. You can see our photo is here, and we also have labels for everything, including a label for photo here. Now some of these labels are going to be redundant. For instance, for the photo, I don't need a label to tell me that this is a photo. That's pretty obvious. So I can go ahead and get rid of that one. I can also get rid of the ones that say first and last name because that's going to be obvious as well. Let's go back into Design View. I'll click on the downward pointing arrow of the View menu and choose Design View. To get rid of something, I'll just select it here, and I'll press Delete on the keyboard. I can also select multiple items again. For instance, I'll click on last here, hold down Shift, click on the first label over here, and press delete as well. Make sure that we're deleting the labels and not the text boxes where the data will appear. Now we can go ahead and start rearranging things. I'm going to click and drag a box to select multiple items at once. Then I can click on them all and drag them out at the same time. So I'm just going to move those out of the way here. I'll go ahead and click off to deselect, and then I'll select the photo and move it up into the upper left-hand corner. Using the bottom right-hand control handle, I'll click and drag to resize it. I'm going to take a look at the rulers around the upper and left-hand edges and make this photo about 1¼ inches wide by 1½ inches tall. Now I'm going to move my first name text box and move it up here to the top. I'm going to put last name right after it. And then I'm going to move building up to about here, department below it, status, and hire date below those. Next, I'm going to move the label for employee ID and put it on top of the employee ID text box here. Remember, we have to use the upper left-hand corner here in order to drag them independently. Let's go ahead and save our form at this point. I'll press Ctrl+S on the keyboard or the Save icon up here on the Quick Access toolbar. And we're going to name this Employee Directory. Go ahead and say OK. And we'll take a look at it one more time in Form View. Now I can see the employee's photo here, their first and last name across the top, their building, department, status, and hire date here, and their ID number here. I can scroll through all 741 of my employees to see their information. As I scroll through, I can see some changes that I might want to make. For instance, the department that Leonard Grant works for is account management, but you can see that it's longer than the available space that I've given. So we can go ahead and make that change back in Design View. I'll switch my view back to Design View. I'm going to go ahead and select all of these here. Using my arrow keys, I'll nudge them away from the photo. And then I'll go ahead and select this edge over here and make them all wider. Once again, we'll switch into Form View. And I can scroll through to see that that looks a little bit better. Once again, I'll press Save to save my changes. So we can finesse these positions as we continue to develop our form. And truth be told, form design will require a lot of back and forth as the final layout gets further refined. Now that we have our form field elements in roughly the positions that we want them, we can take a look at some of the formatting options that are available. We'll pick it back up there in the next movie.